everybody on the platform. This is our October edition of our program, and we welcome you all for today's lecture series. As you know, this is actually not the maiden lecture series that we have, but it's actually an avenue whereby we call on eminent scholars to come and discuss with us. Today, we are going to discuss something very interesting, the interface or the nexus between pragmatics and literature. And we have our erudites and indefatigable scholars in our midst. Perhaps if he has joined, Professor Fashina, that will take us through this phase. And like as we usually say, that PragmaticPoint is a study group. It's a study group that is a study group. It's not an association and will not become an association. It's a place whereby we come together to learn about the rudiment of research and that has to border on pragmatics and other sister discipline, so as to keep us with necessary skills in our research endeavor. Now, on this note, I would like to welcome us to this particular month edition of our program. I will hand over back to Dr. Oji, who is going to anchor the program today, as she will invite the scholar in and take over the coordination from here. Dr. Oji.
I can put on my video.
There we are.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ajiboye, for that warm introduction. And I hear that our speaker is there already. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the citation for Professor Nelson Olabanji Fashina, and then we get started. Professor Nelson Fashina is a versatile professor of literary analysis, theory, and text linguistics at the Department of English, University of Ibadan, Nigeria, where he teaches his ingenious multidisciplinary skills with notable eloquence. He holds a BA Honours degree in English from the former Obafemi University, Adeoti, now Ekiti State University in 1986, and the MA from University of Ibadan in 1988, where he also obtained postgraduate scholarship in Bond for his PhD degree that he completed at the University of Ibadan in 1994. He has taught as visiting professor, served as external examiner, and academic appointments and promotions assessor in literature in English, stylistics, English for specific purposes, pragmatics, discourse analysis, and semiotics in different Nigerian universities and abroad. He rose from the grade of assistant lecturer in 1988 to the grade of senior lecturer through accelerated promotion in 1995/96 academic session at EXU. He bagged his PhD degree in 1994 from the Premier Department of English, University of Ibadan, where he was reappointed as senior lecturer in 1998 and later as a full professor of literature and text stylistics in the year 2010. He was the recipient of the RI Foundation's Exchange Scholarship to England in 1992 at the University of Exeter, Plymouth, England. He also won the African Regional Fulbright on American Postmodernist Theory at the University of Louisville, Kentucky, USA, in the year 2000, where he was nominated and served as a Fulbright valedictorian and also recipient of such awards and distinguished honors as Colonel of the Commonwealth of Kentucky State, an honorary citizen of Louisville in the Bluegrass State. Professor Fashina has served as the Faculty of Arts representative on the University of Ibadan Appointments and Promotions Committee 2012 to 2014, Chairman Faculty Committee on Appointment of Emeritus Professors, Acting Dean of Arts, University of Ibadan. Professor Nelson Fashina does not only teach, research, and publish academic papers in literature and linguistics. He's also an American certified naturopathic physician with operational license from the Nigerian Council of Physicians of Natural Medicine, serving as the Southwest Regional Coordinator and National Librarian to the National College of Alternative and Natural Medicine, Abuja. In all, Professor Nelson Fashina an all-round versatile scholar whose multidisciplinary knowledge is a product of avid, extensive reading and research with high intellectual capacity to break down verbal and non-verbal multimodal text into uncommon epistemological dynamics and generative principles. Please, ladies and gentlemen, kindly make welcome using your virtual hands or emojis or reactions. Make welcome Professor Nelson Fashina. And Prof, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, let me begin this lecture by appreciating the African Pragmatics Association for inviting me to deliver this lecture. I also want to thank everyone who has, contributed to my making as a scholar. One thing is very important. That is the fact that I like to be at a critical junction to see the relationship between language and literature in such an inseparable way as to be able to see the synergy between literature and language. And so this afternoon, the title of my dialogue is The Interface of Literature and Pragmatics, which I like to subtitle as a dialogue across disciplines between literature and pragmatics. Let me see. Close this. Introduction. In the paralinguistic field of pragmatics, the power and functions of language as an act has not been established in the works of J.L. Austin, 1962, and John Searle, 1971. Until this significant contribution to the study of language, early scholar linguists like Ferdinand de Saussure on lang and parole, signifier and signify, and Charles Sanders Peirce, the triadic mode of semiotic transmission, had concentrated on the structural patterns of language, essentially as aspects with respect to the aspects that have to do with classification of language into forms, hierarchies, and functions. After the Saussure, especially in his posthumously published book, Course in General Linguistics, the Chomskyan model of syntactic transformational structures and the Alidean semantic models took the center stage of linguistic inquiry. And this dominated the field of the 21st century. Even though between the 19th century and the middle of the 20th century, there were different evolutions of thought by scholars on the nature of science, structure, and functions of language, with specific emphasis on grammar and grammaticality of language. That was the main concern. The main concern then was the learning of the correct usage of language in conformity with the derived rules of grammar, of the grammar of language. This idea is also present in Fashina 2025, in which I discussed language, linguistics, and the literary object. Issues such as syntagmatic and pragmatic rules, that is the rules of choices of case, tense, concord, chain, and choice in formation of or selection of relatives, reflexives, possessives, prepositions, and so on, in a word grammaticality, form the centerpiece of academic teaching, learning, research, and publications in language. However, the arguments between Noam Chomsky and M.A.K. Halliday on the essentialism of syntax and semantics, respectively, generated extensive inquiries into the problem of structure and meaning in language. While early Chomskyan linguistic model concentrated on the centrality of syntax, which linguists later ascribed as the automation of syntax, Halliday's insistence remained that semantics is central to the automation of grammaticality, or grammatically well-formed and meaningful sentences that are neither ambiguous nor anomalous. Other scholar linguists who are semiotical, contextual in their approach argue that grammatical models alone cannot explain or account for the real meanings of language uses and constructions that were beyond the limits of literal language. And by this, I mean literary language, the language of grand literature's creative works. While the literal language is prosaic and non-poetic and has no embellishments of figurative idioms that are essentialized in literature, I mean literature with initial capital letter, and in literary language, problem occurs where grammatical rules do not recognize or accept them because of the deviation from the linguistic patterns of grammaticality. In fact, the following kinds of figurative or literary sentences were regarded by linguists or grammarians as existing on the borderline of nonsense and grammar, as we can find in Chomsky 1967, Transformational Generative Grammar, TGG, and the Hallidayan semantics before he evolves this all-inclusive and comprehensive model, systemic functional grammar. Language, pragmatics, and literature in critical practice. This particular dialogue across disciplines will provide critical exploration of theory and practice of actual text analysis, not just the grand narratives, but literary constructions, literary analysis, critical analysis, literary criticism, appreciation and evaluation on the highway to developing and understanding a theory of poetics for the analysis of anything that is written. Anything written may include songs, adverts, news, official speeches, political speeches and campaign manifestos, legalese, journals, lists, and all that. But mainly, it is an approach towards understanding the core critical strategies in literature, that is, the grand narratives that are expressible in different genres, such as poetry, prose fiction, drama, and so on, even film. Perhaps as it is with the medical doctor in medicine and surgery, when dealing with the anatomy of man, so it is with the critical analyst, the literary pragmatist, the text linguist, the stylistician, the discourse analyst, the critical discourse analyst, when handling the criticism of ordinary language, or language text or discourse, or a literary text, that is grand narrative, which I write with initial capital letter L. The approaches to critical literary analysis are multivalent, showing the relevance of both literary and pragmatic analysis. This is an integrative and interpretive field that I will term as literary pragmatics. What is literature? We cannot understand the meaning of literature without actually looking at what is literary. The definition of the term literary combines both linguistic, pragmatic, and social cultural dimensions, anchored on objective criteria for assessing what is called literature, and what each language and literature academic departments regard as literature with initial capital letters and literature with initial lowercase m, and what they also regard as good literature or bad literature. Definitions of these kinds of literatures are policed by established, language academic departments. The two terms cover a broad spectrum of activities in language use, and they are changing definitions according to dynamics of social cultural expectations of each age, time, space, and milieu, from the Greco-Roman classical times to the present day. Now, whatever we decide as agreeable definitions of these two forms of literature, it is constant, this is a constant fact, that they do have synonyms, which are derived from our perception of the reality of the two phenomena, from linguistic and formalist view of their features. Some of the synonyms of literature from maybe textual or stylistic, discourse analytical perspective would be text or discourse. Then, of course, paragraph versus passage. Then it is anything written, anything that's written is literature. As a result, literature with initial small letter L, the sentence will qualify for it. So the sentence as in grammar or utterance as in pragmatics. Then we have the word versus the phrase, morpheme versus the phoneme, and so on. These concepts are critical, and they are also basic to the understanding of literary analysis. Other components which would underline the internal structure of whatever we call as a composite text would involve such features as cohesion and coherence, collocation, hyponyms, assonance, paradox, simile, sarcasm, ironies, onomatopoeia, homonym, parallelisms, and what have you, which are features of literary texts. The task of identifying them in literature texts is the concern of early modern literary appreciation, interpretation, evaluation, criticism, theory, and meta-theory. But unfortunately, in the present day literary analysis, the discipline of literature has lost its deep spark of critical and analytical mode to notional and non-evidence-based analysis of text. People now engage cultural studies and notional interpretations without evidence, particular linguistic or pragmatic evidences from literary texts to support their interpretation. So, as I said in Fashina 2023, the business of literary analysis, literary criticism, literary interpretation, literary theory has lost its critical mode. Thus, in the face of this challenge, the introduction of literary and linguistic stylistics, pragmatics, in this case, semiotics and critical discourse analysis, CDA, to the investigation of literature becomes an intellectual messianic endeavor in rescue of literature study. I've commented elsewhere that most of the aspects appropriated to the unit of language today in most language or English departments, belong to the realm of literature study, say in about 40, 50 years ago. But then, nowadays, we find that what we engage as literary analysis is ordinary notional criticism anchored on, cultural studies, which are, though ideological, but limited in objectivity. Now, before we can know what literature is, we have also to know that it's divided into genres. For example, poetry, which is supposed to be a verse, metric patterns in poetry, the idea of internal and end rhymes, rhythmic patterns for grounding, run-on lines, doggerels, graphetic and graphology. All these are components. So the different concepts used to divide poetry into forms can be conceptualized. 1, according to form. 2, according to function. 3, according to literary age and tradition at work in that period. Under form, you talk about sonnets, epics, limericks, heroic and mock heroic poetry, romantic, elegiac poetry, lyrical ballads and traditional ballads, all this under romantic poetry. Then you have metaphysical poetry with all its functions, metaphysical concepts and all that. You know, poetry can be classified using timelines: classical, Augustan, modern and postmodern. All this will form the basis for the analysis of poetry. Another genre is drama. Features such as plot, setting, dialogue, characterization, you know, are aspects of dramatic literature. And they have different dramatic forms of concepts, such as concepts of, you know, forms like melodrama, comedy, tragedy, irony, farce, and what have you. For the prose fiction, there are different critical tools and concepts such as plot characterization, setting, narrative point of view, the techniques of narratology, the first person, that is the first person, third person, or the ideas of, you know, the omniscient narrative, and then ideas of tutorial intrusion, round plot, open and close plot, cross-referencing, self-referencing techniques, situational irony, sarcasm, suspense, descriptive adequacy, the use of, you know, words, and the use of direct and indirect speeches. For the narrative technique, there is the stream of consciousness, the idea of realism, naturalism, surrealism, magical realism are concepts present in fiction. And these are historical, contemporaneous, futuristic, you know, present in dramatic novels. We also have poetic novels. These are functions. We have imaginative prose, highly fictional. There are degrees of fictionality. Then we have the short story, and we have the novella. Now, the following after the classical period, in which case Aristotle, Plato, Longinus debated the issue of mimesis. You know, in Aristotle Poetics, we have the idea that you know, the critical reception of art have to be based on the degree of verisimilitude to nature. And early modern theories include expressive criticism, objective criticism, mimetic, pragmatic, and the modern theories, much more modern, moral, sociological, Marxist criticism, formalist, semiotics, psychoanalysis, gender criticism, archetypal, even Russian formalism and practical criticism, out of which the Anglo-American criticism, you know, evolved with scrutiny. Then you have structuralism, which was an offshoot of the works of the presumed founder of modern linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure, and his contemporaries. Now, today you have deconstruction, postmodernism, and the rest, you know. Now, in an attempt to explain and to present the character of literature, I have gone into all this so that we understand that the approaches to literature and literary analysis. From the viewpoint of the definitions of language, we know that linguists have agreed that language itself is the closest to humanity and the one in which you know, expressions are made based on, you know, the placement of words in the right place, either semantically or other syntactically, or syntagmatically, or pragmatically. So in ordinary grammar, therefore, the sentence is the highest hierarchy. Clause, phrase, word, phoneme, morpheme, phoneme, allophone. But on the other side of the divide, when we go discourse level, we talk about text, we talk about discourse. I don't want to bother myself about the age-long argument about the distinction between text and discourse, but primarily discourse was regarded as the spoken speech, while text was the written. Then you have passage, you have the parable. So the governing principle in these classifications is that each hierarchy is made up of all the other entities below it, or that are subsumed under it. The text, therefore, is the highest hierarchy of linguistic writing or communication. And there are different types of text, the literal and the literary. Consequently, a whole novel of 100 pages is a text, just as a novel of 800 pages is also a text. A group of 5 sentences that satisfy the criterion of cohesion and coherence occupy the position of a text. The same thing is a poem, a drama work, or an anthology of poems. The reason that they have the content is that they have the context and they have conformed to the rules of coherence and cohesion. Now, in Fashina, 1994, we cited Michel Serres of the Johns Hopkins University in his work. Okay. In which he says, he cited Michel Serres that a text is a system of laws, and criticism is a generalized thesis that describes the states of the text. In this, I want to thank Professor Niyo Shindare, who in 1987 availed me this book when it was first published there. You know, that is, textual strategies. Now, the laws that Michel says, talking about here, are the laws of both linguistic and literary rules, specifically the rules of language, grammaticality and literariness, as the case may be. Now, this will enable us to go into the technology of the text in an attempt to interpret, to evaluate, to appreciate, to criticize, or to critique, and also in an attempt to derive, theory, use of the same category, from one generation to another. But for literature must be able, literature with initial capital letter and literature with initial lowercase letter. So the literature with initial capital letter will refer to the grand narratives, as we said initially, while the literature with initial lowercase l refers to all kinds of writings, including graffiti, including newspapers, doctor's case notes, and what have you. A text will become a text when it has served and followed certain rules. These rules cannot be understood exclusively via literary criticism, and therefore the relevance of pragmatics cannot be discounted in a situation where we are discussing the interface of literature and pragmatics. So a text will display unity of ideational propositions, and the ideas in a text must be logically related, meaning it's resident in all parts of the work. And as a result, it is only, an intricately packed and systematically programmed, approach to meaning beyond semantics, such as we have in pragmatics, that can take care of the challenges posed by literature and literary interpretation. Now, for the purpose of this lecture, let's look at, the types of text, linguistic text. We have multimodal, plastic, architectural, structural text, social text, tradocultural text, religious text, bionic cellular text, medical text, zoological text, cyber text, astronomical and astrological text, pretext, as we have it in Fashina, 1994, pretext, post-text, intertext, intratext, combi text, which may comprise this combi text may comprise all the items earlier enumerated. Now, what we have discussed about text has to do with, the early modern idea of the Romantics about organicism. So a text is therefore an organic whole, and it's the business of the critic, or the analyst, or the linguist, or the pragmatician, or the literary analyst to approach it just in the same way a surgeon would to approach the anatomy of man. So a text displays symbiosis of language. Text can be used interchangeably for literature, yes. Any complete text qualifies as literature. It is organic. When one element is removed from it, it does and sense that there's something missing. And I give it to him. Most of the poems of Niyo Shundari, pays regard, most of the poems pay regard to this powerful intertextuality and organicism, to the extent that they are fused with magical compactness. And so an attempt to analyze them will require not just the services of, neo-ideological criticism or ideological criticism, but it will take, a linguist to understand the textuality, the textness, the organicity that is ensconced in the poem of Niyo Shundari. In this particular lecture, there's no time. I will not be able to make specific analysis. We are discussing a broad-based, category of thought about the need for a combinatorial kind of approach to the interpretation of literature, using both literary approach and also the linguistic pragmatic approach. Now, we know that the domain of paralinguistics study, which later grossly influenced the analysis of literature and its criticism, later began to influence scholars' perception and study of oral literature, especially oral performances in African and other Oriental parts of the world from the 20th century. The emergence of studies in oral historiography, oral literature, oral performance, which Richard Broadman calls as verbal art, provided solid grounds for literary and linguistic exploration of the discourse functions in language and literature. And as such, scholars like J.L. Austin, who lived between 1911 and 1962, and John Searle, 1932, engaged the different speech art functions of spoken language, speech as utterance, especially how language is used in context to convey meanings. J.L. Austin's speech act theory is popularized in his work, How to Do Things with Words, 1962, in which he discussed the performative nature and functions of words, of performative utterances. Let me say at this juncture that because of the relative failure of grammatical approaches, which, for example, basically interpretation of meaning, semantic has limitations. Therefore, the use of performative speech acts of utterance has come to fill the gap. So the verb phrase in Austin's work, do things with words, is indeed a self-explanatory. It is indeed self-explanatory of J.L. Austin's acceptance that pragmatic speech acts are the very most relevant functions of literature. So, if that is the case, I want to say that, therefore, that literature is the very pragmatic function of language in general. Literature is the very pragmatic function of language, as we realize in poetry performance, dramatic action, film, video, fiction, storytelling acts, storytelling acts, and their response effects on the reader or audience, which is the perlocutionary force. This is the theoretical foundation upon which John Searle later built in exploring his speech acts with focus on consciousness and social reality context in human speech. While argument persisted among scholars, especially Roland Barthes, Edward Said, and Emmy Benveniste, scholars identified that speech underscored the primary of speech. Therefore, they enthroned the spoken speech over the written language because of its closeness to reality. So most of the time, the effect of pragmatics will be felt more. More of the speech acts will be felt in spoken language, perhaps, because of the force that's identified with it. And therefore, in this very lecture, talk about, for example, the force of language in the biblical, phrase. God said, "Let there be light," and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. You see, in looking at this particular biblical phraseology via the lens of pragmatics, there is a kind of force when God said, and God said actually as the past tense, say is the present, and God said, "Let there be." Said there, that verb, as in the pragmatic constative, that is saying something. That is, the kind of information, passing information, existing at the locutionary level. So, but the illocutionary level, which actually is the intended, form of the form of message in the speaker making the utterance, Then the perlocutionary act, and God said, "Let there be." The verb "be" itself, naturally, when it leaves the deep structure and then comes to the surface structure, it becomes "is," and "is" plus present and plus active in terms of its tense, and "is" an be. That "be" there is an equation, and it means equal to. Is the verb of existence, is the existentialist verb. And so when God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, you see, why was there the light? Because there's a force in the word "said." It is this same perlocutionary force that works in the speech act behavior of pastors and spiritualists who evoke, language to perform miracles, and said, "In the name of Jesus, rise up and walk. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." That "rise up and walk" is a command. Grammatically, we look at it, we look at what is the mood. It's a command. It's a command. Rise up and walk. And that command itself is a force. So the pragmatic force that is explained in pragmatics, expressible in the J.L. Austin idea of the locutionary, the locutionary, and the perlocutionary, is a breakthrough in linguistic study, such that we are able to recognize that language itself is like a force in physics. For example, in physics, we talk about force. bringing two things together, bringing iron and iron together, you have to apply heat. That heat is a force. So, and the idea of fusion, the fusion of two different things, and when you fix them, they come together, become solid. And so, when you talk about language, therefore, language is a force, and pragmatic analysis has been able to identify this. And this is the same kind of force that creates the magical effect in drama, stage drama or film or whatever. And so pragmatics should never be taken for granted. And in this, I want to commend the efforts of the African Pragmatics Association led by Professor Odebumni, who himself has done a lot of work. I have several of his works with me on literary pragmatics. And so in Fashina 2025, I discounted and denounced the separatist argument between linguists and literary scholars that the two disciplines are separable. No, I say no to that. And I have always, in my academic career, stood at the junction of looking at literature via the lens of language. So in grammar, we talk about analysis of the sentence, but in pragmatics, it is utterance. Okay, utterance is the noun, utter is the verb. So when you talk about the verb is the seat of action, and it is the seat of miracle, and it is the seat of action. It is the seat of that force that is in pragmatic, analysis. Now, after the 1960s, we see that further studies on language in different complicated engagements were developed. And thus we have the works of J.L. Austin and C.L., apart from those of, Paul Grice, and Kroeger. So the sentence in the grammar of written language, is regarded as a set of words with a finite verb making complete sense. The grammar of dialogue or conversation or spoken discourse pragmatics conceptualizes its own complete sense of communication as utterance. So, in the study of utterance, I have come to conclude that when we talk about, dialogue or character or dramatic speech, for example, which is literature, we have to talk about utterance. And utterance elicits action. For example, if I come to class, as a lecturer or as a professor, and I say, everybody stand up, that statement, stand up itself, is a command, but it bears, a kind of illocutionary intention, and then a performative speech act that will make people to rise up immediately. And they will rise up because of the context of my status as a lecturer, as somebody that is not, a student. If a student comes in and says the same thing, it's not going to be obeyed. So when you look at the context of, Grice's pragmatics, you will see that it talks about, a context. We'll visit that soon. So an utterance is a unit of communication with different dimensions of intended, unintended, implied, logical, deflectional, and affective meanings. These are expressible in pragmatics of utterance or speech as we have said, locutionary, and parlocutionary as aspects of different branches of pragmatic speech acts. Now, therefore, given a scenario, a professor has not arrived at the hour of lecture and the students become agitated. Then the student, Adenike, who cites the professor as he's coming, says, "Oh, Professor Bade is coming," after citing him at a distance. Adenike's statement is not just a grammatical declarative sentence or statement, but it is an utterance, and it has different implications ranging from the following expandable meanings: to inform the class, which is locutionary, to warn the class, which is illocutionary, to to threaten the class, which is the pragmatic force or the reaction or response action of the class, with the effect on them, that makes the class to adjust their behavior because the professor will soon come in. So the above meanings are dimensions of derived meanings of permanent speech act functions of utterance are not negligible. They are highly relevant and inextricable in the correct interpretation of literature. In pragmatic analysis, the utterance is the best unit of language segment upon which analysis of meanings or practice are applied. The parts of a language segment are not necessarily amenable to grammatical semantic analysis because the strictures of semantic rules in grammatical study, because of the strictures of semantic rules in grammatical studies. But in the study of grammar of a language, the sentence is regarded the highest unit of analysis under which the clause, phrase, the phrase, the clause, the phrase, the word, the morpheme, the allomo, the allophone, in that reductive order are subsumed. Pragmatics, therefore, as a paralinguistic model, is a make-up attempt to fill the gap of inadequacies of core linguistic grammatical approaches like phonetics and phonology, morphology and syntax, lexis and semantics, to the study of the logical meanings and structures of meanings in language use that are beyond the realm of grammatical models. Thus, in pragmatics, instead of talking about sentence or clause or phrase or whatever, linguists talk about, pragmaticians like J.L. Austin and Sear talk about, persuasion. They pass the utterance into different structures of persuasion, their own language units or segments. So as a result, we go to, let me skip. Literature, with all its propensity for phoric referential style of language functions, cannot be adequately explained by text linguistics alone, not even by stylistics alone, except perhaps systemic functional grammar, And therefore, we give it to pragmatics that in explaining such complex, components and features of, grand literature, such as the use of anaphora, cataphora, exophora, endophora, metaphora, all these that we read as a specialized form of. In my teaching of language and literature, I told the students that literature is a specialized form of language. It's a specialized form of language. Literature itself is a language. It's a different kind of language. And literature is the pragmatic function of language. Even in literal, constructions, like the girl is smart to have returned what she stole, we cannot say that this statement is not literary. It's not literature, but it is not literal. It is literary. And that is the fact that it has an anaphoric frame of reference. The girl is smart to have returned what she stole. The reference here, which is the feminine pronoun she, is in reference to the MP, the MP1, who the MP there, which is the girl. So she and the girl, which is the subject MP, the girl functions as the antecedent. Every text-bound analysis, is endophoric. So you do not go outside the text. As a result, we want to see some constructions as endophoric, some as exophoric, some as, the ones that are endophoric are self-referential. The ones that are exophoric are cross-referential. And because of this notion, this feature of cross-referentiality, transreferentiality, we want to believe that every construction in language is itself in one way or the other phoric. It's in one way or the other phoric. For example, when we go by the ideas of, Ferdinand de Saussure, and later, Terry Eagleton in his book, in explaining Ferdinand de Saussure, he says that even any word is itself a metaphor. So this goes to defeat the age-long idea of the definition of a metaphor. So every word, whether literal or not, is a metaphor. In drama text, you can have characters who reflect people outside the play. Such a text becomes normative. So all literatures are, whether with initial capital letter or with, lowercase letter L, are referential, and so they are metaphoric. Okay. Now, to specifics. Language, God, and pragmatics of biblical and poetic verbal force. In court or in ordinary social discourse, people can say, God is my witness. Let's look at that particular utterance. God is my witness. Now, is this a statement of fact? This is a propositional content. The speaker is making an assertion that God knows or validates their truthfulness or commitment. It is also literal statement, whose literal meaning is to fill a communication space. Because how can you say God is your witness? Can you bring God in evidence? The intended meaning of force, which can only be explained by pragmatics, and where this occurs, for example, in literary text, we need the service of pragmatics to explain. Because we say that the intended meaning of force, which is the locutionary, informing, defending, seeking sympathy, presenting an appearance of innocence, to say God is my witness. The speaker is making a solemn declaration or oath, invoking God as a witness to their truthfulness or commitment. Thus, in pragmatic function, the utterance serves as a form of emphasis, assurance, a guarantee, conveying the speaker's sincerity or conviction. But the parlofunctionary act, that is the force or effect of utterance on the listener or judge, is for the judge to be affected, for the utterance to have tellable effect on the judge by creating persuasion in him to act in a way that will favor the person that made the speaker. That is, the judge to feel sorry or sympathetic with his case. For Grice's pragmatic concept of context, with the viewpoint of this particular utterance, is that it's a religious context. The invocation of God to add gravity and moral weight to the speaker's statement to rescue him or her from being adjudged to be guilty. Now there's the maxim of emotional tone practice. The utterance is to convey strong emotions, such as conviction, desperation, or urgency. The witness of this theory, which I want to identify, is that pragmatics cannot determine if the speaker is, one, emphasizing the truth. Pragmatics cannot determine whether the speaker is sincere. Pragmatics cannot determine whether the judge or hearer may have a wrong parlocutionary effect on his sense of judgment because he cannot physically see God, to ascertain the logic and truth of the speaker's locution in evidence of justice. Number 4, the utterance, God is my witness, reflects a common linguistic strategy used to convey strong conviction or sincerity. So, I said, do not tell me that as long as God is pleased with your actions, you are justified. And you say, okay, God is my witness, that I have good intention. God cannot be your witness because by virtue of the context, relevance, which is in for Grice's, pragmatics, you cannot bring God in evidence.
Thank you, Prof. Professor Fashina. I'm afraid
is
I'll
my time
have to.
over?
Yes.
Is my time over? Oh my God. Why don't you give me 2 minutes? Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
Prof.
2 minutes,
Please,
let me
our
round
time
up.
is up. Okay.
Let me round off. Okay. In rounding off, I still have examples here. In rounding off, I want to say that, when you consider, such maxims as, um, in Paul Grice's and Kroger's, pragmatics, the maxim of truthfulness, but your utterance must be truthful, must be informative, must be relevant and clear. It is not clear when you say God is my witness. We can't bring God in evidence. So in order to facilitate successful communication based on this assumption, Grice divided his cooperative principles into maxim of quality, quantity, relevance or relation, and the maxim of manner. And there are others that are subsumed under it that we used to explain. I have other analysis that I've made here, but let me conclude by saying that, you see, my dialogue this evening is in proposition of what I call literary pragmatics, a field that has been explored in the works of Odebumni and others, but I think we should do more because pragmatics has come to rescue, the field of linguistics from its limitations because of the strict rules, of grammar. For example, semantics will not take sentences that are so metaphorical, that are so imaginative, sentences that have, embellishments, of word pictures. Semantics will not take that. For example, Halliday or Chomsky will say such sentences exist on the borderline of nonsense and grammar. But that nonsense itself is sense, and that is what pragmatics has come to take care of. So we need the services of pragmatics in getting to the deep level of analysis in literature. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, thank you very much, Professor Fashina. This has been an enlightening and mind-blowing presentation. Wow, please let's put it up for Professor Fashina. Let's have the clappings, let's have the emojis. Let's appreciate this great icon for this beautiful banquet he has dished out to us tonight. Prof, thank you so much. We do appreciate
You are welcome.
We do appreciate this. And before we make room for people to ask their questions, I'd like to use this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of our esteemed professors in the house. Please allow me to welcome again Professor Nia Sundari. We are more than honored to have you here. Thank you so much for gracing this occasion for us. We do appreciate you. We also would like to thank Professor Dan Izevaye for being here with us. We do appreciate you, Prof. Professor Makigile, thank you so much. And I've found your comments useful and well funny, but thank you so much. Professor, I can hear an echoing. All right. Professor Remiraji, thank you. I really did find it pleasurable to explore your work, Harvest of Laughters, from a pragmatic perspective, and it was really good. Thank you for being here too with us. And thank you, Professor Adeyemi Adegoju, Professor Ayo Sisanwo. We really appreciate you all for being here. And if I've missed out anyone, I'm sure that Dr. Simeon Ajiboye will catch the name later on, but thank you all. So we have a few minutes for a quick Q&A. I would like you to indicate by raise of hand if you'd like to ask a question. Yes, I've mentioned Professor Makigile. Thank you so much, Prof, again. So do we have people who would like to make a quick comment, I would like to ask a quick question, or even make a quick contribution to the discussion. I already see one comment from Professor Mark Igile, who says that Professor Fashina, maybe you want to respond to this. Professor Igile said, God is my witness that Professor Fashina has drawn a functional relationship between literature and pragmatics. So, I wonder what you had to say to that, Prof.
Well, incidentally, he worked on a stylistic analysis of the Bible as literature, which I supervised most like 2 decades ago. And he has been working in that direction. And I know that apart from the fact that he is a pastor, though I'm not a pastor, I'm a prophet, what we are doing here is a kind of intellectual engagement. So there's no reason for me not to analyze the language of God. So you can't say God is my witness, because you cannot bring God in empirical, evidence in the court or in social discourse. And so to say God is my witness is an attempt to invoke certain, illocutionary and particular effects in attempt to persuade people to act in a way that will favor you. So, and pragmatics takes care, of that. But I guess that in our law courts, the use of God is my witness should not be admissible and evident in a court of law, because God cannot come in physical evidence. God cannot be seen. So it will not be a pragmatic, a pragmatic statement. It won't be pragmatically truthful, to say God is going to be. Then the next thing will be, where is God? As the judge I was, where is God?
Thank you so much for that response. Okay, so I would like to call on Professor Shindari to make a comment. I see that his hand is up, and afterwards, Professor Akin Odebumni. Thank you. Meanwhile, just before Professor Shindari takes the floor, I see this beautiful comment by Abiodun Jombadi, and he says this is nothing short of depth in Professor Fashina's CGZs. I'm enjoying this delivery, and I call this progression fashionism. Prof, you have one there. Thank you. Please, over to you, Professor Shindari.
You're welcome, sir.
It is I that should be welcoming you.
We are trying to.
I think the guy whose words have just been relayed to us said everything. Fashinism. Well, I want to say thank you very much for your discourse. We're typically versatile and eclectic. This is how it should be. But I must say that as somebody who is very much in that field, oh yes, one other word before I go on. Professor Odebumni and others, congratulations on your great effort. It's unusual to hear something like the Pragmatic Association of whatever so easily, because we just keep on wondering. Some 50, 60 years ago, when people like us were in graduate school in North America here, pragmatics was something studied in the periphery. I think pragmatics has made its way right to the center. But it must also be careful of overgeneralization and superficiality. when a discipline is establishing its autonomy and its power, it has to be careful to make sure that it came from somewhere. This idea came up my thesis defense in 1979 because I made use of Austin and others whose works were new at that time. And then people then asked, what about the Neo-Fethian school? There is the there is the Chomsky school, there is the Neo-Fethian school. You made a good point in highlighting the weaknesses in Chomsky's tiny book, Primary Revolutionary, Syntactic Structures, 1957, small book. That is where he introduced what we now call transformational generative grammar. Created a lot of discussion, like what you've just done. So 1965, when he followed that up, said,
Yes, that theory.
he brought semantics into the study of syntax, and some kind of corporate study seemed to emerge. But that was not all. From the London school, from the British school and up there to Canada, my supervisor actually is a specialist in what we call language and situation. It is that simple. Text and context. I'm not hearing those very simple words these days when we talk about pragmatics. Pragmatics is a study of contextualization. The Yoruba people will say, Pelelako, Ulabo. You can say Pele in different ways and mean different things. The sheer physicality of the communicative process itself. The Yoruba say, Omona, Omoju. That is, it is not all the words that come from the mouth that you use to make meaning. The human being, the structure of the human being itself is an embodiment of language. So you do interact, you do communicate without words. The power of pragmatics, as I'm seeing it here, is actually the way it's been able to bring these two together. But a lot of work needs to be done. I want to see more delicacy of analysis. I want to see the exploration of a deeper exploration of the relationship between stylistics, text linguistics, and pragmatics. Discourse analysis used to cover everything. Now that pragmatics is branching out, I don't want pragmatics to see itself as independent. It's good for it to remember where it actually came from. So it's good that all these things are happening. Let's make it simple again. Language and situation. Text and context.
Thank you, sir.
That's brilliant. Brilliant one, Professor Emeritus Professor Neo Shindari. Thank you so much. Thank you. There was Professor Odebumi's hands up. Please, can we listen to you now, Professor Odebumni?
The guru himself.
Professor Odebumni, are you there?
All right. Could you hear me now?
Okay,
Yes,
very
we
well,
can hear
Prof.
you.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I unmuted. All right. So I was saying that I appreciate Professor Fashina for that very beautiful presentation. He's my boss, so you don't expect anything less. And of course, he's the one who has brought all the big people in the world to the Pragmatic Point program for this month. My big Oga, Professor Neo Shindari, I'm very happy that you are here. Professor Dan Zebaye, the grandfather, Professor Emeraji, all my mentors. Thank you very much. Well, let me just make a very quick comment, and then I allow others to talk. I agree with Oga, Professor Neo Shindari, that You know, we have so many technicalities that are really not being talked about in the applied linguistics within discourse analysis and pragmatics these days. Where I think it's simply because many of the disciplines are getting more narrowly specialized, and then pragmatics is one of them. And I would say, well, preliminarily, that pragmatics would say that it does not have any dependence on discourse analysis. You know, at that very arrogant, do I say arrogant, or very specialized level, because we would always go back to 1938 when Charles Morris said that as part of semiotics, we have syntactics, we have semantics, then we have pragmatics. You know, that's one level. And of course, you know, we also have the history of differentiating from philosophy, pragmaticism, and then pragmatics. You know, all of these are technical issues. And so even from semiotics, literature has come in because we are talking about the study of science. So I would like to say that literature is a very clear, practical demonstration of all that pragmatics stands for. For us, in modern pragmatics, we will say that pragmatics is the study of language in the context of use and users. And of course, discourse analysis is the study of language in use for communication. You know, there are several technical differences between them, but also there are many similarities. And of course, the two of them dated back to the BCs, and then they came through to the ADs up to the 1983 when we had the first book of Pragmatics out. So I would say that Oga has spoken very well, but I will allow others to contribute. Then if I have time, I say more. Thank you very much for that very beautiful presentation. Thank you very much. So Ruth, carry on.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Odebumni, for your intervention or comments there. I'd like to know if we still have more people who would like to make comments so that we can round this off. Okay, let's see. Okay. Right, there's a question in the comments, and that's from Ayola Joseph. He says, "Thank you, Prof, for that insightful and eye-opening presentation. Since
Thank you very
pragmatics
much.
deals with meaning in context, how can Western pragmatic theories be effectively applied to the analysis of oral literature and the social-cultural context of African societies?" Did you get that, Professor Fashina?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Let me say
great.
this. While it is the passion in intellectual discourse to engage post-colonial and attempt a decolonization of our intellectual theory, it is also necessary for us except we understand, we first of all have to understand those theories that come from the Western metropolitan center. When we understand them, we're able to know whether we have the language in our indigenous, theories by which we can rename them and then begin to use them. For example, nothing can be more pragmatic than our proverbs. But I agree, it's not only Africa that has proverbs. You know,
Sorry, Professor Fashina, there is an echoing. Are you linked in by two devices or with two devices?
Okay, put off the other device. So
the audio, perhaps.
that, you know, pragmatics is still evolving as far as I am concerned. And I know that we will get there in attempting to indigenize aspects of it in relevance to the interpretation of our African literatures, oral literatures, and indigenous poetics. So we have to be patient. After all, even nowadays, there's what we call Yoruba chemistry. There's Igbo chemistry. So people are attempting to indigenize, these models, these scientific principles, and all that. So the same thing will happen in pragmatics. But I want to say hello. Can you hear me? I want to say that practically, you know, the pragmatics is not even, it's something that is practical, because our dance steps, you know, our songs, our dressings, you know, the way we dress, our dress in pragmatic is multimodal. It's multimodal communication. Our hairdo is multimodal communication. You know, the style of your hair, it's multimodal communication. So apart from speech, you know, you can also have, you know, multimodal acts, you know, which are explainable. And I remember last session when I took, you know, my students through a multimodal analysis of room 33, Faculty of Arts. We did a multimodal analysis of it, and it's still available with me. In which case, I told them that that architectural design itself of that particular room is a multimodal communication, and that it is not only a language that can communicate. So pragmatics would deal with, therefore, anything that has communicative effect. And our type of architecture here, which is a mode of pragmatic in play, will be different from the type of architecture and sculpture. For example, in the West, that itself is a theory upon which we can ground a distillate, a theory of a distillate of a theory that will be a kind of African pragmatics. Incidentally, the name of this association is African Pragmatics Association. So your question is very relevant. I thank you very much. We everything about indigenizing the tools of pragmatics is already in the works.
Thank you very much for that response. And I see that Prof's hand is up again. So may we hear you, Prof?
Well, you said my hand was still up. Yes. Yes, if there's no one else to talk, maybe I should say a few more things. Okay. Could I go ahead?
Yes, Prof. And then I'll read out some of the comments in this section, and that'll be it. Unless we have another volunteer, yes.
Okay, no problem. You know, I was recommending that my boss, Professor Emiraji, say something, and then the grandfather, Professor Zebaye, also do. But, you know, I was saying that, well, pragmatics, we define it in modern terms as the study of language in the context of use and users. So we are not just talking about language in use, but also the user. And so if you are going to do a very practical and correct literary analysis, you have to look at the language use and then the language user. And you know, when you talk about characterization only in literature, you can see the two of them playing out, and you know, that's really correct. But then we have our own concept of literary pragmatics, which might not be the general panoramic one, where you talk about whatever relates to language in use and then the language user. And that is where we talk about the voice, you know, voicing as stipulated by Jacob May. Of course, you know, we have May 2000, we have May 2001. And of course, in May 2001, we talk about Pragmim, which has made a very big stride away from speech act. Because speech act is just what you do with your speech. But pragmatics is what you do with everything, just like Professor Fashina tried to say. Everything that you do, your action, your face, your body, you know, everything that you do. But you know, all of these are encapsulated in literature. And so the use of language in literature will be a demonstration of the principles of pragmatics. And then within the concept of literary pragmatics, we have what we call perspectivization, which of course is also fairly distributed in the conceptualizations in literature and discourse analysis. But then, you know, there we are talking more about voices, the voice trash, the voice smash, and then the voice crash. You know, all of these are concepts that are also established in literature. You are talking about a character's voice as owned by him, as owned by others, as owned by the society, of course, again, as overlaid by other characters or other people. You know, these are interpenetrating conceptualizations that should serve as a meeting point between literature and language. But you know, it's all very interesting that people separate the two disciplines unnecessarily. And that's why I want Professor Emeragi to say something. You know, he has a very correct conceptualization of what it is. It is not always correct to say the two disciplines are diametrically different. You know, there are several areas where they meet. And so I'm going to stop there, and then I want my boss, Professor Emeragi, to say something, and the grandfather to also do, and then you can move ahead so we can end the meeting. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Odebumni. May I please invite Professor Remi Raji, please do us the honor of saying something on this all-important issue. Please, you have the floor, sir. Professor Remi Raji.
The apostle of post-proverbial.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Well, I have put myself in a listening mode, you know, to learn more and more about the very important progression of scholarship as being pushed by my friend, Professor Akin Odebumni and others. I had the opportunity of giving a presentation about a year or two ago, and I was able to make a lot of friends among the association, the African Pragmatics Association. And we continue to learn. This is the age of not only perspectives, but also the age of breaking forth in different parts. Right from the 1960s, there have been a lot of proliferations of scholarships. And it is not surprising that even within pragmatic studies, you still have other sub-forms, sub-fields. And it is to the advantage, you know, of African scholarships that we have more and more thinkers, original thinkers who are bringing to bear on what they already studied, you know, from the past. In these contemporary times, we learn more and we introduce not just new terminologies, but we bring forth new thinking in very innovative ways. And for me, it's just a case of perpetual learning and studying. So it's more like a goodwill message, and congratulations to my friend, Professor Fashina, for a very great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Raji, for lending your voice to the discourse. May I have the honor of inviting Professor Dan Izevraye? I hope I'm calling that right. He's a grandfather of this. Wow. So we cannot end this without hearing something from him. Please oblige us, sir, if you may. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
very well, Prof. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay. I came just to listen, but since you've invited me, let me make one comment. It's good to see that such progress is being made here in Ibadan in the field of knowledge. In other words, we've not only decolonized knowledge, that was the theme of the 60s and 70s. We've taken over and we are taking over and making contribution to knowledge. I would like to say just one simple point. When the lecturer rounded up his excellent performance with the conclusion taken from the performance in a courthouse. And somebody said, God is my witness. And the speaker said, don't bring God into this. Why not? Why not? This is what literature is about. And Professor Fashina has just demonstrated that literature is reality. Every sentence, as he said at one point, is literary. So if a witness comes to court and says, God is my witness, you can't dismiss it. You can't say you can't bring God into this. We bring God into courthouses every time. When the Bible or the Quran is put before a witness and he places his hand on it and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, the judge doesn't dismiss him. He accepts this. You have brought God into it. It doesn't matter whether you hear him speak or not. He is present by just that invocation. I think the denial comes from the contest between believers and not believers, whether God exists or God does not exist. But that moment, that literary moment in the courthouse, God was present. It does not matter whether it is God as seen by the bishops, as understood by the bishops or not. Literary performance is activating faith. And in that faith is God. It may not be the God as understood by the pastors, but it is a force that makes something happen. I think perhaps Professor Fashina should consider this. God is brought into the courthouse. It acts on the performers, the witness, the lawyer, the judge. And so you cannot dismiss it and say, don't bring God into this. That is giving God a very narrow meaning. And God in the courthouse transcends that interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Just one
Amazing, amazing. Okay, Professor Nii Ashimbade, go.
just one. God is
Yes,
my witness. Talking about contextualization again. Let's take that scene to a place like China. And the courtroom is there, and everybody there is Chinese. Would it ever happen that in that kind of country? And I'm just trying to look at how context either idealizes or restricts or explains or explicates what we do. God is my witness in Kenya. How will that work out in a community of atheists?
Well, my response to that, sir, quickly, is that between Professor Emeritus Professor Ajiboye and your linguistic self, sir, I want to say that God in that moment is a linguistic essence, a pragmatic essence. So God there is not God in the idealized religious sense, as Emeritus Professor Ajiboye said, but God is a pragmatic force within that. And that essence, that is essentialism, the essentialism of God as a force, is being pragmatically applied by the speaker to rescue himself in evidence. So, and if according to, the pragmatics of Paul Grimes, we want to talk about relevance, we want to talk about context, talk about cooperative principle. The cooperative principle evolved by theory, evolved by Grimes, is such that, there must be a kind of shared and identical knowledge of that essence by the judge and the speaker. So if the judge is not is an atheist, then that statement is irrelevant. But if the judge is a religious person, then it may work. However, I think it is a scientific business of a pragmatician, for example, to lay out the facts as they are. Okay, the fact is the cooperative principle between the hearer and the speaker is not established within a particular context. So the context may differ. The context where the judge is a judge person, the context where the judge, or members of the jury are not, religious people. So for me, I would have, I would elect to do a pragmatic analysis, that would make me to be neutral of whether God is God in the religious sense of it, or that God is a linguistic essence. Thank you, sir.
Maybe because religion is really not pragmatic. I mean, when we talk in terms of the abstract forces, abstract propensity of spirituality, it's just that it's difficult. In when did Buhari come to power? Buhari and Diago, and we were all asked to go to court, and our Professor Ajiboye might remember this. We had to go to court to declare our asset. I had no asset. No, how many university lecturers had any asset at that time? But we did go to Yaganku in Ibadan to do it all the same. When I got there and they handed me, over the Bible to me, and I said, no, I don't swear on the Bible. Instantly, they brought the Quran, the copy of the Quran, and I said, no. I know for about 5 minutes, there was a lot of argument. How do we handle this kind of thing? It's the way pragmatic situations actually develop offshoots. There is a lot of grammar and a lot of grammar in the pragmatic, because it envelopes everything we do or say.
Yeah.
But how does it approach what we think?
Mm.
All right, thank you so much for the brilliant submissions. And I think that this is a conversation that we might want to, as PragmaticPoint study group rather, take on some other time, perhaps inviting juggernauts to have these debates. Maybe we'll call it a literary debate. And I think it will be a very fun and a revealing conversation. Thank you so very much again, Professor Fashina, for your talk. Thank you, Professor Shimbade, for your insightful contributions. To Professor Dan Izebaye, Emeritus Professor, our grandpa in the house. We are really happy to have you. I'd like to, at this point, hand over to Dr. Simeon Ajiboye to round off the program.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Oji. It's actually very clearly to us tonight that our program today is very enticing, illuminating, thought-provoking, and I can see also that debate will surely continue after the end of the lecture today. As I rightly said earlier on, when we are starting, that this is PragmaticPoint, a study group that houses several scholars across Africa. We gather monthly to deliberate and discuss anything that borders on research, especially in pragmatics and other sister disciplines. Thank you so much for tonight. I know we have very big names, grandfather, fathers in the house. And on this note, I think I'm not the rightful person to close today's meeting. I will hand over rightly to Oga to do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Simeon. Well, you have acknowledged the bosses. I've also done the same. We really feel highly privileged to have them here. And so we have to appreciate Prof. Fashina for bringing all my big bosses to this meeting today. Professor Dan Zebayo.
If the UI Department of English Solidarities, they see their child and their grandchild, delivering, they want to solidarize. So that's it. So it's like the English department is on the global network this evening.
Professor Odebumni, are you still there?
Yeah, precisely. That was what I was trying. So where we have the big bosses, I'll say that very shortly because we wanted to go. Could you hear now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Could you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
We can hear you here.
Okay, so I was saying that, well, we thank Professor Fashina for being the grandchild and for being a very good representative of our great Department of English, University of Ibadan. It's a very rare privilege to have all of these people, not even one, just one of them, to be with you. So we really appreciate all of them, Professor Dan Zebayo, Professor Niyo Sundari, Professor Emiraji. It's rare to have them together. And of course, you could see why we talk about the great University of Ibadan. Thank you very much. Well, the good thing is that the event has been recorded, and within the next 12 hours, the video should be available, and I'm going to share the video with all of you. You could also visit our website for the past event that we had. And of course, we wanted Professor Emiraji to have some rest before we invite him to where our November event, if it's free, or January event for what we call the Theorist Series. The theory series. I always tell Oga that he has a theory of pragmatics, and then he told me he was happy I said it. And so we would like to listen to him talk once about the theory of post-proverbial. And of course, I told him it's an eminent theory of pragmatics. So on this note, I say thank you to everyone, all our members, my friend Professor Yemi Adegoju, and other colleagues who have made it to this event. We thank you very much. We do this on a monthly basis. Next month is another time. If Oga is free, he will be with us. If he's not, he will be with us in January. So thank you all. We really appreciate you. The Department of English, University of Ibadan, we thank you for releasing Professor Fashina to us for this very enriching program. So thank you all. I say God bless you. So bye-bye and good night.